One tank, one crew, 15 minutes, 25 British vehicles destroyed. That happened on June 13th, 1944, in a small Norman town called Villers-Bocage, and it was carried out by a single Tiger I and the man commanding it. When it was over, the British 7th Armoured Division, the famous Desert Rats, the guys who'd beaten Rommel in North Africa, turned around and retreated. One tank did that. But here's what makes that story interesting, and why we're going to spend the next 15 minutes talking about the Tiger I. It wasn't supposed to be that good. It was rushed into production before it was ready. It broke down constantly. It was so heavy it fell through bridges. And Germany only ever built 1,347 of them. Meanwhile, the Allies were stamping out Sherman tanks at roughly 49,000. So how does a tank that almost never worked, made in tiny numbers, against an enemy with a seemingly unlimited supply of armor, end up being the most feared tank of the entire war? That's the actual story, and it's a lot weirder than you'd expect. Let's go back to 1941, because that's when Germany's tank problems started. Up until Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, German panzers were doing fine, fast, well-coordinated, good enough. Then they drove east and ran straight into the T-34. The T-34 was a Soviet medium tank with sloped armor, a powerful gun, and a Christie suspension that let it move across Russian terrain like it was nothing. The Germans had literally never seen anything like it. Erwin Arders, one of the Henschel design engineers, later wrote that there was, and I'm paraphrasing here, genuine panic when the army realized Soviet tanks were superior to anything they had. So Hitler ordered a new heavy tank. Bigger, better armed, more armor. Two companies got the contract, Henschel and Porsche. Yes, that Porsche. Ferdinand Porsche, the same guy who'd later designed the car your uncle wants. He was confident enough that he'd win the contract, that he pre-built 100 chassis before the competition even happened. Then he lost to Henschel, mostly because his design ran on a petrol-electric drivetrain that required massive amounts of copper. Copper Germany desperately needed for other things. The 91 leftover hulls were eventually converted into tank destroyers called Elephants. The Germans were nothing if not efficient about their expensive mistakes. Henschel's design won. Production started in August of 1942, and the thing they built weighed 57 tons. To put that in perspective, a modern garbage truck weighs about 26 tons fully loaded. The Tiger I weighed more than two of those. It was so heavy that standard military bridges couldn't hold it. There's a 35-ton weight limit on most of the bridges the army was using, and the Tiger blew past that by 22 tons. The engineers actually had to design a deep fording system for the first 495 tanks built. A full snorkel tube, inflatable rubber seals around the turret, the whole thing, so the Tiger could drive underwater across rivers up to 5 meters deep. 30 minutes of setup time required, in a combat zone, because of course. They later dropped the underwater driving capability to save money, which honestly seems like the right call, but the bridge problem never went away. The armor was the reason for all that weight. The front hull was 100 millimeters thick. The gun mantlet, the rounded piece around the cannon, ran between 120 and 200 millimeters. These weren't just thick plates slapped on the side, they were interlocking steel construction, built like a steel box that happened to have a gun sticking out of it. Allied shells didn't just glance off, they often shattered on contact. British Cromwell tanks, which were the standard at Villers-Bocage, needed to be within 100 meters to have any chance of punching through the Tiger's side armor. The Tiger could kill a Cromwell from over 1.5 kilometers away, which brings us to the gun. The 88mm KWK-36 was adapted from an anti-aircraft cannon. If you've read anything about World War II armor, you've already heard about the 88. It terrified Allied crews across every theater of the war. The version fitted to the Tiger was 56 calibers long, which in gun terms means the barrel was 56 times the diameter of the shell. Long barrel, high muzzle velocity, flat trajectory. very accurate at long range. In British firing trials, a Tiger gunner scored 5 consecutive hits on a target roughly the size of a coffee table from 1,100 meters away. The VAR-Proof, the German Weapons Test Office, calculated that the 88 could punch through the front of a Sherman from 2,100 meters. The Sherman's 75mm gun couldn't penetrate the Tiger frontally at any range. None. 0 meters. It didn't matter how close you got. American General Omar Bradley found out about this the hard way in Normandy. He was told the new 76mm guns on upgraded Shermans could handle German armor. After seeing the results in the field, he famously complained that ordnance had told him the 76 would take care of anything the Germans had. And then he found out he couldn't knock out a single German tank with it. The one Allied weapon that could reliably kill a Tiger at range was the British Sherman Firefly, an upgunned variant with a 17-pounder cannon, and the Germans knew it. German tank crews were specifically trained to target Fireflies first, so the British started painting the barrels to disguise them, making them look like the shorter 75mm guns. This worked about as well as putting a fake moustache on something. So we've got nearly impenetrable armor and a gun that kills at ranges most tanks couldn't even see their targets. Why wasn't the war over by Christmas? 2 reasons. The Tiger was a mechanical nightmare, and there weren't nearly enough of them. The wheel system alone is a beautiful case study in over-engineering. The Tiger used an interleaved road wheel arrangement, concentric overlapping wheels in 3 rows, like a very complicated watch mechanism, which sounds impressive until you realize that removing a single inner wheel to replace its rubber tire required pulling out up to 9 other wheels first. In a workshop, with all your tools and time in the world, this took hours. In the middle of Russia, in winter, it was catastrophic. Mud and ice would pack into the spaces between the wheels overnight and freeze solid, locking the tracks completely. German crews would sometimes wake up to find their Tiger literally frozen to the ground, unable to move until they could build fires under the suspension to thaw it out. It was that bad. The engine situation wasn't much better. The original Maybach HL210 was underpowered for a 57-ton vehicle, and it overheated. The 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion reported in May of 1943 that most breakdowns were due to driver error, which is a polite way of saying the tank demanded a level of mechanical skill that not every soldier had. A good driver could nurse the Tiger across hundreds of kilometers without incident. A bad driver could trash the drivetrain on a single forced march. The Army eventually swapped to a larger Maybach HL230 engine, which helped, but the Tiger's operational range cross-country was still only about 110 kilometers. For context, the Eastern Front was enormous. The logistics of keeping these machines running was genuinely worse than fighting in them. And then there's the transport problem. The Tiger was too wide for standard European rail gauges. Just getting it to the front required switching from its wide combat tracks to narrower transport tracks, removing the outermost road wheels, loading it onto a special flat car, and hoping nobody measured a tunnel wrong. 30 minutes per side just for the track change. This is a tank. It's supposed to show up and kill things. So the Germans had this weapon that was expensive, complicated, barely transportable, prone to mechanical failure in cold weather, required specialist drivers, and could only be built in small numbers because each one took twice as long to manufacture as simpler tanks. The manufacturing cost of a single Tiger was roughly 300,000 Reichsmarks. A Panzer IV was about 115,000. You could buy 2.5 Panzer IVs for 1 Tiger. Given Germany's production situation in 1943 and 44, increasingly squeezed for raw materials, factories getting bombed, workforce getting conscripted, the math was not favorable. And yet, the kill ratio. The Tiger battalions, even while constantly under strength, fighting on multiple fronts, limping from one maintenance nightmare to the next, maintained a tank kill ratio somewhere between 10-1 and 19-1 across the war. Single engagements produced numbers that shouldn't have been possible. At Kursk in July of 1943, an SS sergeant named Franz Staudegger engaged roughly 50 Soviet T-34s near a village called Psyolkny. He was alone. He used every round he had and claimed 22 kills. the rest retreated. He got a Knight's Cross for it. The 502nd Heavy Panzer Battalion, by May of 1945, claimed 1,400 enemy tanks destroyed. The 503rd's top commander, a sergeant named Kurt Knispel, not even a commissioned officer, was credited with 168 tank kills, more than any other tank commander in the war. He died in April of 1945, 1 month before the end. And then there's Villers-Bocage, the moment that more than any other defines how the Tiger was experienced by the people who had to fight it. It's June 13th, 1944, 1 week after D-Day. The British 7th Armoured Division is pushing southeast through Normandy, trying to exploit a gap in the German lines west of Caen. The lead elements of the 22nd Armoured Brigade reach a ridge called Point 213, outside a little town called Villers-Bocage, 12 miles southwest of Caen. The column stops to take stock. Tanks parked on the road, crews stretching their legs, half-tracks lined up behind them. What nobody in that column knows is that they're being watched. Michael Whitman was 29 years old, already a decorated tank ace with over 100 kills, commanding the 2nd Company of the 101st SS Heavy Panzer Battalion. His Tiger was parked in a tree line overlooking that road. He had 4 other Tigers with him. He had no time to organise a coordinated attack because the British had appeared faster than expected, so he did what turned out to be a very bad idea for the British and a very good idea for him. He went alone. Whitman pulled his Tiger out of cover and drove it alongside the British column, at roughly 50 metres, just parallel to the road, working down the line. A British radio operator named Sergeant O'Connor, riding in a half-track, broke radio silence and transmitted, and I'm quoting directly here, "For Christ's sake, get a move on. There's a Tiger running alongside us 50 yards away." That was the only warning the column got. The Cromwells that returned fire watched their shells bounce off. In less than 15 minutes, Whitman's company destroyed 13 to 14 tanks, 2 anti-tank guns, and 13 to 15 transport vehicles. Whitman drove his Tiger into the town itself, got temporarily stopped by a 6-pounder anti-tank gun that disabled him, borrowed another Tiger from his unit, and kept going. The 22nd Armoured Brigade lost 27 tanks and 217 men that day. The Desert Rats, veterans of North Africa, one of the most battle-hardened formations the British had, retreated. General Montgomery's plan to outflank Caen collapsed. The operation, called Perch, was over. Whitman got decorated again. He died 8 weeks later, on August 8, 1944, when a British tank, probably a Firefly from the Northamptonshire Yeomanry, put a round through his Tiger's hull and detonated the ammunition. He was 30 years old. The turret blew off. 4 of his crew were 20 years old. The Tiger I kept fighting until the end of the war, but by late 1944, the equation had shifted. The Sherman Firefly could kill it at range. The Soviet T-34/85 could handle it at medium range. Allied air power could spot and destroy Tigers before they ever reached the front. The logistics of keeping them running became impossible as Germany's fuel supply collapsed. Tigers were increasingly abandoned when they broke down, simply because there was no fuel to tow them. Only 9 Tiger I tanks exist today. 8 of them are static museum pieces. The 9th is Tiger 131, captured in Tunisia in 1943, and it's the only running Tiger I left on Earth. It lives at the Tank Museum in Bovington, England, and it still runs under its own power. You can watch it drive. 70+ years old, still doing what it was built to do. 1,347 Tigers were built, against roughly 100,000 Allied tanks. On paper, that's not even a contest. On the road outside Villers-Bocage, that math meant nothing at all.